YouTube folks.
Hey, Bill.
We're getting ready to do a podcast. It'll be a timeline podcast. And let me do a quick introduction. In fact, I'm going to try to tie it together. I can always cut it and redo your intro. Welcome to episode 132 of Timelines. Today we have Tom Schwab, United States Naval Academy. It's hard for me to say Naval Academy because I'm a West Pointer, but I'll say it anyway. They're our sister branch. They pick us up, I guess, when we need help and vice versa. So anyway, Tom Schwab, he's an entrepreneur. He's a Naval Academy grad, of course, and he's got a heck of a history and a background to talk about. But first, I want to find out, when you're in high school, what made you decide to go to the Naval Academy?
Well, the biggest thing is I was looking at different colleges, and I knew that I was paying for my own. And I saw people coming back from going to University of Illinois, and they came back to their same jobs, flipping burgers and doing other things. And there was one person in our town that went to the academy, and he came back and was home for a couple of weeks, and he'd been to Australia doing different things, and then he was on to something else. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a whole lot more fun than coming home flipping burgers to pay for school. So that must have been like sophomore year, and I started to look into it. And I was a Midwest kid. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. The farthest west I had been was to see the Mississippi River, and the farthest east I had been was Indiana. So my world was pretty small, and I loved it. I was that same person that came back between their plebe and second class year, and I came back from Australia, stayed at home for a couple of weeks, and then was on to someplace else. So to me, as a Midwestern kid, it was ideal.
So it's a busy 4 years, isn't it?
Oh, it was. And I loved it. The old joke is they can make it harder, but they can't make it longer.
So at the academy, first of all, how did you get into the academy? What did you have to do?
Clerical error.
That's a good story. We talked a little bit about that.
I always say there, I got, when people asked how you got into the Naval Academy, I always say it was a clerical error. Because, I had decent grades in school, did well on the PT test and all of those things. But I knew I was born without depth perception. When I look through binoculars, I see two images. They don't fuse together. And that came up on all of the physicals. But somehow I still got an appointment to the Naval Academy. And it wasn't until my first class year that I was there at Bethesda going through a pre-commissioning physical, and I failed that test miserably. And I failed it when the petty officer gave it to me. I failed it when the chief gave it to me. I failed it when the department head of now I can't even think of what's vision is called, but when their department head gave it to me. Optometry. Yeah, I was going to say orthopedics. Optometry. When he gave it to me, he looked in my chart and he's like, "You were one lucky guy." He says, "Right here in your chart." And he says, "You're not physically qualified to be in the military." And I was thinking, this is my first semester or my first class year. And I'm thinking, am I going to get kicked out? And he just laughed and he said, "No, they've invested too much money in you, but you will never be a line officer." And so at that point, I was like, "Oh, this is great. I'll be a CB. I'll go back and get my master's. I'll never have to go to sea. I'll never have to wear a uniform. This is great." But the needs of the Navy are such that I was a mechanical engineer, and they needed nuclear power people. So they gave me a waiver and told me that I could either go surface warfare or surface warfare nuclear. And nuke came with a $10,000 bonus on it. So right. That's why I signed up.
Oh, it's a good field too. It's a specialty field. How many jobs are there now? You're in the Navy. How long were you in the Navy on active duty?
I was at 4 years at the academy and then 5 years after.
Okay. So what years were those?
83 to 87 at the academy. And then 87 to 92 active duty. So
and that's right in the middle of the turn down when they're just right after the Persian Gulf. They were letting folks go left and right. In fact, they wanted people to get out of the military. It's kind of the way the military goes sometimes.
Yeah, I always there's a lot of people that are younger that don't understand that, but I always refer to that as I got out when peace broke out. We right. pulled into the Persian Gulf when we had the Russian trawler behind us, and when we came out, she was gone. And
right, the wall came down.
Yeah, the Soviet Union had dissolved. They'd pulled all their ships back, and peace broke out.
And they were downsizing actually before the Persian Gulf War too. It was the whole time you were in.
Correct.
Yep. Now you were under Reagan. It was who? Do you remember who spoke at your graduation?
Yeah, we had Vice President Bush.
Oh, Vice President Bush.
Who was there. So it was
Very
just
good.
after
A Navy guy, Navy aviator.
That's right.
He probably liked it.
It was great, and unfortunately it rained, so it was inside. But I have to say that was the first
no Blue Angels, huh? Unless they had little plastic ones or something.
No Blue Angels, and it was the first graduation that I'd seen because I always worked it out to get out of there and go on a duty station, so I wouldn't have to stick around for the parades.
Yeah. So during the military, what did you learn in the military that's helped you transition into the civilian world?
Biggest thing is probably the work ethic and the systems.
Oh, especially the Navy. You guys, I know what you guys go through in your shifts. Ooh.
Well,
especially at sea.
You come out of the military, anybody, and I always tell people that you come out and you think that if you work 12 hours, you got away with a half day. And most right. Civilians come out and they're thinking, wow, I had to work over 8 hours a day. And it's like, so I think you come out with that work ethic. And then for me, it was really that systems idea. I always look back on that, and it's amazing. The Navy can take highly motivated, highly educated people and train them to run a nuclear reactor in about 2 years. If you look at the average age of somebody running a nuclear power plant, it's like 21 or 22. I mean, you look on the average age on a carrier is 19 or 20. So what they were able to do is come up with systems and document it and teach that. And, if you have the systems, you can make things work. If not, it's not the systems it's not the people that break down, it's the systems that break down. So I've always thought of life from an engineering standpoint. So even as I got out in business, trying to figure out what's the system here that we can do, that we can test, that we can always optimize. And that was just a different way to look at life. And it's always been successful in any of the businesses I've been in.
So before we leave the ship, what ship were you on? What type of ships? Where'd you go?
Aircraft carrier. So I was a plank owner of the USS Abraham Lincoln. At the time, she was the newest and the finest. Now she's just the newest on getting her second tank of fuel.
So for the listener out there, the plank owner is the first cruise, right?
That you're there when the ship is built.
So actually being built?
Right. So I was there at commissioning. I was there in the shipyard when she was being built.
Where'd they build it?
Newport News, Rhode Island, Newport News, Virginia.
Yep. I've been there, seen those huge, massive carriers, and the old carriers hanging out there too. They turn into razor blades.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's kind of neat. So that was you did one major cruise during your whole time, or how many times you go out?
We did all the workups for, which was amazing, to be able to take a ship out and for sea trials and to try to break it. And seeing how fast it goes, how fast it turns, all that was amazing. And then we took
all classified?
Oh yeah, I can just say it was fast, and they even covered the speed indicator, so you couldn't quite figure out what the knots were. But that was the only time I saw the reactor up towards 100%.
Oh boy.
But with that, so we took her then from Norfolk, Virginia, around South America to change home ports to Alameda, California. And as we were going around, the Gulf War broke out. So we came in, got some stores, did some repairs, and then we went off for a Westpac.
I might have flown over you back then. I was flying HH-60s, 129th Air Rescue Wing out of Moffett.
Okay.
Still had the P3 there. P3s there, and you just go up to Alameda. It's kind of fun little flight there.
Oh, I loved it. I was stationed there for a year and a half, and
nice.
The 6 months that I was there, I loved it.
Oh, that's nice. A great place to be stationed, and you get to see a neat part of the world there, neat part of the United States.
Yes,
it's a lot to do. So, you ever get over to Reno, Tahoe?
Not too much there. By that time I was married and had a couple kids. So the big thing was going to either San Francisco or Napa, and living so close to the city.
Right.
We didn't realize how well we had it. We could look out our window and, when it wasn't shaking, from the jet engines being tested in the middle of the night, you could see the San Francisco skyline.
That runway, I've landed there and they're always giving bird warnings. It's like a bird sanctuary at one end of it. It's crazy. They've closed it down now, though. I don't know if they decommissioned it. So very good. So anyway, it sounds like you had a good time in the military. You're prime now. You're academy grad. You can pretty much write your ticket in the corporate world. What did you end up doing?
Well, I actually wanted to work for a company in California there. It was a medical device company called Stryker, and I loved what they were doing. Loved the culture behind it. There was a lot of military people there. But once again, they offered me the job in San Jose, California, and I looked at it, and I didn't know what the cost of living was in California, and it didn't take me long to figure out that I'd have to work, my wife have to work, and the kids would have to sell drugs in order to make a mortgage payment. So on a snowy February day, they told me that they had a facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So I flew in here and I said, I'm not going to die here, but I'll live here for a few years to work for Stryker.
I meant to say that you're coming today from Kalamazoo. I was going to mention that. So you are still in Kalamazoo. You're stuck in Kalamazoo. Where are you originally from?
The suburbs of Chicago, out in the Fox Valley area, St. Charles.
Okay, I know those areas. Yep.
But, I don't look at it as stuck in Kalamazoo. I still don't want to die here, but it was a great place to raise a family. Now I've got a granddaughter that's 1 year old. And so this is home. And I love the internet now because I can connect with anybody I need to from, Kalamazoo, Michigan. So it's an amazing time with that. And I always joke that if my son-in-law moves to Idaho and takes my granddaughter there, you'll be hearing me from Idaho on Skype.
Yeah. I was going to say you definitely can move around if you have a digital business. And what did you do? You're in Kalamazoo. How long did you stay in this work and what was your progression?
Sure. So I started with a, Fortune 500 company, Stryker. It's a medical device company. Started in the engineering side and really quickly learned I didn't like engineering that much. I liked working with people. So I went from 3 months as a production engineer to production supervisor, unit manager, and was moving up on the inside of the company. But it took me about 18 months to realize that it was like living in a submarine. So if you didn't live within 100 yards of me, if you didn't work in the same building that I did, or if you did not sit, 2 pews in front of me or behind me at church, I didn't know anybody. And I just hated that. So with that, I said I wanted to go out and sell. I saw great opportunities there. And at that time, they told me, no, you can't go from engineering and inside to being a salesman. Nobody that's a mechanical engineer has ever sold for us. So after them telling me no, I wasn't too keen on that. So I took a job with a competitor with a small startup for about 18 months. And after I showed them that I could sell and that I was taking market share from them, that's when they called me back and said, would you like to sell for Stryker? So it was great. I got to sell orthopedic implants, knees, hips, shoulders, all of those things. And it was great because I got to call on orthopedic surgeons in the operating room. It was a lot of fun, thinking on your feet, always something new. And I could draw on my skills with that. So, I was doing that, was doing sales and marketing, worked up into sales management, and then ultimately had the opportunity to get a distributorship for the state of Michigan. And that was something that I always wanted, to have my own business. And, even though I was, the manufacturer's rep for a company, it was still, my P&L. It was still my employees. And so we did that and had a great time with it, built up a great organization, hired lots of ex-military, and just had fun. Then when the economy tanked in Michigan, well, I always say Michigan led the economy or the nation into the Great Recession. The manufacturers came back and said, we want to buy back the distributorships and we want to cut out the middleman. And that always sounds great until you look in the mirror and realize, hey, I'm the middleman. So we had the opportunity to sell back the distributorship, but we had a small sideline business. And it was really something that our customers, our doctors had asked for. And it was helping people, stay compliant after surgery. So we looked at that and said, hey, can we take this business and can we grow it from a regional player to something bigger nationally? And the biggest decision on that was really the feedback we got from our customers. I always say, customers are the only experts out there. You and I have opinions on our business, but the customers will really tell you what's important. And most of these units we rented, and half of the units that would come back with thank you notes. So I looked at that and said, we're making good here. We're doing well. How can we expand this out? And so really in 2008, that's when I started to really pivot and go into more of the online space.
So 2008, 2007, 2008, the market was turning. Banks were having problems. There was a big crash. I actually know a major, no four, would put all his money into the stock market and lost $800,000 while I was on a tour in Afghanistan. It was a rough year, wasn't it?
Exactly.
He recovered somewhat, and he'd recovered from that, but because he kept his money in the market. But it was a really rough year. So how do you transition out of those years to make money? How you're surviving?
Well, with that, we had sold the distributorship. So we had that base. And then, with the tools of the internet, everything that we added was incremental sales and incremental business. So at that time we had I'd run across a book called Inbound Marketing by two smart guys out of MIT. And what their thought is that nobody wants to be sold. Everybody wants to buy to solve their problems, but nobody wants to be sold. So that people go on the internet to find answers to their questions. And their thought is the people that are going to win going forward are not the ones with the big budgets that can spend the most on advertising or pay-per-click, but those people that can answer those questions with content, things like blogs, this podcast that we're doing right now. And those people would gain thought leadership, they'd gain trust, they'd gain authority, and ultimately they would not only get the sale, but they would get the lifetime value of that customer too. So we really followed that strategy, and we did a minimally viable test with it. And in 90 days, we were amazed that we saw all kinds of traffic, leads, and customers from it. So with that, we doubled down on it, and we were really the first company to really use inbound marketing to grow an e-commerce business. HubSpot ends up using us as a case example all the time, and became the e-commerce leader for the HubSpot user group and speak for them among other companies. And so it was really fun. It was a great time to learn things. And that's one of the things I always missed about the military was the continual learning. In the civilian world, I'd run into a lot of people that would say, I've got 20 years sales experience. And I'd look at it and say, you've got 2 years sales experience that you've been doing for 20 years. So when we got into this internet field and being an entrepreneur, starting a business, on that side, boy, I just learned so much from that. And with that, I'm more excited about the next decade of my life than I have about any previous one.
So the e-commerce business, tell us a little more about it. How many people were involved? What did you actually sell and market?
Sure. Have you ever been on Crutches before?
Thank goodness, no.
All right. Well, we're one of those companies where we don't want repeat customers. And if you've ever been on Crutches, you know the limitations of it. And, we always said we helped people that couldn't bear weight and couldn't bear crutches. And so we had the doctors that were sending us patients because they didn't want people tearing apart their good work. Then we also had, patients that the doctor told them, stay off your foot for 8 weeks. Well, if you're a mom, you can't do that for 8 weeks. You've got kids. If you're a business owner, you can't just not show up for 8 weeks. We even did some work with some orthopedic surgeons in the green zone because they were frustrated that, the troops there had to carry their weapons at all times, right? It's a war zone. Well, you have somebody that twists their ankle and now they're walking along and they've got the rifle with them and they've got crutches. Now, how do they do both? So we tried to find hands-free options for them. So we were one of the early companies that nationally had those little knee scooters, the rollouts that people could go along with. We had some hands-free crutches. And as I look back on it now, it was probably an awful business to start with e-commerce because there was no lifetime value of customers. But we looked at it as we were helping people. And the way we grew our business is we'd have one happy customer that would tell more happy customers with us.
So that was goodbyecrutches.com, right?
It is.
I finally figured it out. Believe me, when I saw that, I started doing a little research about you. Kind of was confusing. I see it now where it comes from.
And I always say that that's one of those examples of the customer is the only expert. Because when we started our business, the legal name of the business is Surgical Specialties Medical Devices, LLC. And we had a customer that called us up one time, and I took the call. And Her first words were, "You've got a stupid name for a company." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she says, "I can never remember it. And when I'm telling other people about it, I can never remember the name." And I thought, oh, okay. So I asked her, "What would you call the company?" And she thought for a second, and she says, "I'd call it Goodbye Crutches." Well, it didn't take me but 30 seconds to go to GoDaddy and see if that domain was taken. Bought the domain, and I think our DBA, our doing business as, changed the next day.
Very good. Very good. So Goodbye Crutches, it's a success. You've got a team. That's the size of a company. Are you actually mailing product and sending product around?
Yeah, we're shipping product throughout the United States. We've got a team. We've got distribution partners so that we can get it to anybody really in 2 days with ground shipping. And the amazing part is that as we were getting more and more content out there and more known from our inbound marketing, we had partners from overseas calling us. We had a partner in Canada that said, "I would love to, work with you here." And up to that point, we hadn't been able to serve anybody there. We had a partner in the UK that said, "I'd love to work with you." And just from the shipping the product, we couldn't help those customers. So we started to work with them. And then the same way down in Australia. We've got somebody in Costa Rica that partners with us also. So it was just an organic growth from that. And really today, on the internet, you are what you publish. So people find out about your company from what you publish, and that could be, blogs, social media, or even podcasts like this.
Okay, Tom, now I think it's going to get interesting, at least for me, because
all right,
you have a business, you've made money. It looks like you've been successful in the Navy, you've been successful, saved money. In the corporate business and your first business, you've had constant success. Have you had any times that you weren't as successful? I got to ask that question too.
There's a double-edged sword on that. People say, "Tell me about a time you were a failure," and I can never remember.
Failure, but this time you could have done things better.
Oh yeah, well,
I don't like that failure word.
Well, I always look at it as not a failure, but a pivot. And I always look at it as I've got different cycles, and my wife is the one that's pointed this out to me. It seems like in any job, I'll spend about 2 years banging my head against the wall to make it work. And at the end of 2 years, it starts to work and it becomes profitable. Then at the 4-year point, it becomes very profitable and I become very bored. And so with that, it's like time to either sell the business, have somebody else run it, and go on to the next stage. And I look back on the military, and that was perfect because, what's your average assignment? 2 years. So about the time you're really getting good at a job or even comfortable with it, it's time to go on and learn the next thing. And so that's one of those things where I always say that, the first 2 years of any project is probably when I look at it and say, I'm seeing the least success, but I'm confident that I'm building that foundation, planting those seeds, learning the things I need to so that it will be successful. And at that point, then everybody looks at you and says, wow, you're an overnight success. And it's like, yeah, after 2 years of hard work, you can be an overnight success too.
I've got to mention something. This is really interesting. I've never thought of it this way, but I've often thought about my time in the military and getting out of the military, the transition, and things I would do different. I got out of the military after 9 years, but I went in the Air National Guard flying air rescue. So it wasn't completely out, but I was still out. And I can honestly say I started a design build construction company. I didn't go to work for a corporation. I had really done well on some investments and some property I owned. So I had about $300,000, which takes every bit of that money to start a company like I was starting. And for 2 years, I went through a lot of money getting going. You can't just buy your equipment like you're in the military. You got to really budget, make sure it works. I had a lot of AutoCAD systems and computers back in the day, around in the early 90s. But it took me about 2 years to really become profitable and really do some nice things. I had a couple small subdivisions, won an award with a custom house in my 4th year. And then like you, someone asked me to run for Congress, and I ran, won the primary, and it's a long story. I should have won the general, but Gary Condit beat me. It's a story in itself. But I think I got bored like you at 4 or 5 years, and I had success, but it sure was a lot of work. That said, 9/11 hits. I was activated that day, went back in for a long tour, actually 3 years, and then got out for a while. And then I decided to go back in and finish my active duty up on a special program, which I really liked. That's 5 years straight through doing a special program. But I really finished up about 2000, January 2013. I got back from Afghanistan in December. But twice now I've had to start again. But I decided to do something completely different. And that's where you are. I decided to go into the digital world of podcasting, netcasting. I was thinking to myself, I said, the National Broadcasters Association has billions of dollars in it. And I think those advertising dollars are going to go someplace. And I think you can start little local TV channels or TV netcasts in every city. And so I started looking at different things and evolving. But I'll tell you what, I'm into it a little over 2 years now. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, figuring all the bits and pieces. And that's where you are, because if you've sort of figured it out a different way.
And I guess in hindsight, what would I have done differently? I think I would have worked hard for myself as opposed to working hard for somebody else. Because like you said, when you get out of the military, going to the academy or being a military officer, you'll get out and the big Fortune 500 companies want you. And why do they want you? Because they know you're going to work hard, that you've got character, that you can be successful. And so they want you on their team so that they can be successful. And I think that I went to that because it was the next safe job or secure job. And it was the next thing to do. But I really wasn't happy until I started doing something on my own. And I think that idea of safety or security, you make your own. You're not going to get that from any industry. I mean, think about it. There's a lot of great people in the military that got pushed out in 92 when peace broke out. There's a lot of great people right now that are getting pushed out. And, they started thinking, well, this is a secure industry. There's a lot of people in corporate America that are doing great things, thought they had a career there, but the company gets bought, gets sold, things change, and now their security is gone.
So companies have been wiped out too with new technology.
Exactly. And it's nothing that person did, but their security they gave to somebody else. I think if I was doing it again, I would have bet on myself. And I also would have worked for myself because I'm sure I'd be a lot farther along than I am right now.
So if you don't mind, what did your wife do when you first got out?
She was a stay-at-home mom.
That's
and
good.
Like I said, we had 2 kids, wasn't making a whole lot of money. So I went with a Fortune 500 company. And, I can still remember my dad told me I was crazy when I left the military.
Oh, yeah.
Because his point was all you've got to do is wait around for another 15 years and you can retire. And then I spent, a couple of years at a Fortune 500 company and had a wife, a couple kids, and a mortgage. And I wanted to go off and sell on straight commission. And my dad once again told me, you're crazy. You've got a steady job here. All you've got to do is, put in another 20 years and you can retire. And, he may have been right. I may have been crazy, but I know I was happier going after my own thing. And ultimately life is too short. I can't imagine this last, 20 or 30 years just putting in time, waiting until I can retire. I just turned 50 years old and I've got no plans to retire. I sort of look at it as I'm semi-retired right now because I'm doing fun stuff with people I love and I'm getting paid for it. It's like, why would I retire from this? To drive my wife crazy? That would be the only thing. So, a friend of mine, Dan Miller, from 48 Days to the Work You Love. I mean, he's 68 years old. And if you talk to him, he'll tell you what he's got planned out for the next 2 decades. And he's serious about it. And that's what I want to be. I want to keep doing fun stuff like this until I can't do it anymore.
How did you get to know Dan Miller?
Was in a I am in a mastermind with him. He put one together a couple of years ago and a friend of a friend knew him and I got invited to that and we've gotten to be friends from that.
Very good. I know he's one of the top leaders in the digital online podcasting community.
He's a great man and just shows how you can do it and that whole growth mindset and that there are no competitors out here. It's really just people to work with and that servant's heart. I mean, he started doing content marketing and inbound marketing before anybody had that term. He was out there doing a podcast or a radio show. He was putting out his newsletter and he gives away so much information freely and it, comes back to him.
I think you just explained content or inbound marketing, but for the listener, why don't you clarify it?
Sure. Content marketing is the idea that you engage with people with content, right? So we all build our online engines, our websites, our email lists, our nurturing that we do. That's the engine. But what you need to run it is fuel, and that's the content. So that content could be blogs, social media posts, podcasts. The one that I've been really focusing on is just being a guest on other people's podcasts like I'm doing here. So that's content marketing. Inbound marketing is the idea of, we all know what outbound marketing or push marketing is. And that's, I've got a product that I want to sell to you. And Bill, I'm going to interrupt your favorite television show, your favorite sporting event with a commercial. I'm going to put up a billboard just so when you drive by it, maybe you'll buy my product. And it's interruption marketing. And everybody, I would say nobody really likes it. Inbound marketing is different. It's sort of a pull. And it's the idea of, Bill, if you've got a question, I want to be the first one that has the answer to that. So when you go into Google and put your question in, I want there to be a podcast that shows up with me in it. I want there to be a blog that shows up, maybe a free infographic or a PDF, something. And the idea being with that is that you can attract people with that content, and then you engage with them and help nurture them through that entire buying cycle. So it's not a sales funnel anymore. It's a buyer's funnel. How can I help you solve your problem? Because if I can help you solve your problem, at the end of it, you're going to be delighted. You're going to be so delighted that you'll give me certificates of appreciation. As Rabbi Daniel Lappin calls them, certificates of appreciation look just like dollar bills. And that's really what inbound marketing is all about.
Very good. So driving on, that sort of puts us where we are today. What are you doing today? How long have you been doing it? And exactly what is it?
Sure. About 2 years ago, I took an ownership role in Goodbye Crutches. So promoted the people on the inside to run it. I took more of the owner's role in it. And I'd had so many people requesting from me, well, how did you build your business with content and with inbound marketing? And can you help me do that? And I was really energized by that. You know, helping other people's businesses and getting that idea and that strategy out there. So I started a consulting firm called Inbound for eCommerce. And once again, I think this is funny because most of my clients don't know what inbound marketing is when they come to me. And the other ones don't consider themselves in e-commerce. But I look at it as if you're trying to make money on the internet to monetize what you're doing, that's e-commerce. So we've got coaches that are trying to get their message out there and to get more clients. We've got authors that are trying to launch their books. We've got, nonprofits that are trying to get more donations for their cause. We've got e-commerce companies and manufacturers that are trying to connect with their customers, not just to get a transaction, but to get a lifetime value. And so we help them work with inbound marketing on that. And the thing that we've really been focusing on this last year is helping people attract more visitors, engage more leads, and convert more customers by being a podcast guest. Because you think about it, marketing is nothing but starting a conversation with your ideal customer. And blogs used to work really well for that, but they're really saturated now. And so we did some testing and we found that just being a guest on a podcast converts 25 times better than blogs. So if you can get on a podcast that your ideal customer is already listening to, you can tell your story, you can build that know, like, and trust. That's your best flow of new customers. And so we've been teaching people how to do that and do it now through an online course that teaches them.
So your online course actually teaches people how to get on podcasts?
Yeah. And it's the thing is getting on podcasts is actually not the hard part. You can get on a podcast, but you won't get business from it because it's got to be part of an entire system. You need to get on the right podcast. You need to be able to say the right things so that people get to know, like, and trust you, that you don't turn them off. And you want to ultimately turn them from being a visitor to being a listener to a visitor, and ultimately being a lead and a customer.
Very good. So what's the name of the business and what's the website?
Sure. The website is tmschwab.com. That's the easiest place. Figured that's what I went by in the military, and that's what all my friends and clients know me as. So it's just tmschwab.com, and I'll give you an example of how this works. So here I am on a podcast talking about my experience in the military, talking about how I've grown my business with podcasts. So now I've got your attention. Well, either I've got your attention or I don't. But if you want more information, there's only so much that I can do on a podcast. But I could tell you to go to tmschwab.com/timelines. And there'll be a page there just for Bill's listeners. And, whether or not you listen to this the day it airs or 2 years afterwards, you're going to find out all the information we talked about. There'll be an infographic there that shows you all 6 steps on how to take people from being listeners to leads. There's a place where there's a 30-minute video training, and you can listen to that, and it'll take you through that entire thing. There's a place where you can sign up to get a free copy of my upcoming book that's on this same subject. So this whole idea, so if you look at it, I'm on a podcast that has my ideal customers on it. I'm getting people to know, like, and trust me. Now I'm taking people from listeners to being visitors to my site. And if people go there and want the information, then they become leads. So that's how the system works.
Very good. Plus, you get to meet other people like me.
Oh, podcasting is amazing.
We'll see each other someday face to face. Small world. Podcasting is a small world. The top folks.
There's an article in Fast Company that came out about a month ago, and it talked about podcasting as being the new networking. And just think about it. You know more about Bill than a lot of people maybe that worked with him in the military, right? Because you hear him every week. You hear him talking about different things. So there's that connection there. And I'll put a link to that article in there also on the show notes or on the welcome page. And that's something to look at. So even if, you don't want to do a podcast, if you've got a service or a product or something to offer people, you could be a podcast guest and get in front of those customers, because, anybody that tells you that doing a podcast is easy has either never done it or never done it well. And, the great ones like Bill make it look easy, but I can tell you, my hat's off to him, that all the hard work that he's put into this. So, once again, we'll let the Army do all the hard work, and then I'll come in and make it easy. So I'll let you do all the work, and then I'll come in for the half-hour interview and get the benefits from it.
I think it's a great idea. Hey, this is a great time to pause for a minute, but beforehand, we've got Jonathan Denwood, which I'm going to invite him on at the end if he's still here. He's my co-host on WP Tonic. We're on that new platform called Blab, and I see you have some experience with Blab too, because you've got some people you're following and people are following you. But this is an amazing platform we're on right now.
I love Blab. I was a big fan of Periscope when it first came out, but to me, Periscope was a dialogue, or it was a monologue. And Blab, you have the opportunity to have dialogue with people, and really, that's all. That's all it is. I mean, what the tools of the internet are supposed to connect people. They're not supposed to replace people. And that's one of those big things that even in the automation that we look at in our businesses, it's supposed to amplify what you do, not replace what you do.
So I'll add one more thing to that. We're producing a podcast on Blab, and I'll tell you what, it makes it a lot easier now than when I first started to create podcasts because of this platform, especially interview format. So with that, I'm going to take a pause for a minute before we go into the next section, which is all about your success and leadership principles. In the books you've